Now,
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
Good Wednesday morning to you. It's 7:06 here. It's O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in here to your favorite radio station, News Talk 105.9 WMAL. Coming up later this morning at 7:35, we're going to check in with Hans von Spakovsky. Going to be joining us to talk about these charges against Donald Trump with regard to January 6th, but also Arlington doing away with ranked choice voting and all that jazz. All things elections coming up with Hans von Spakovsky. I'm Larry O'Connor, alongside Julie Gunlock. Julie?
Good morning.
Good morning. Look who it is. It's Matt Schlapp.
Yay.
Matt Schlapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union, the group that brings you not just CPAC, but frankly, more importantly, at this time of year, and this is, I think, the 52nd year the American Conservative Union has put out their report card of members of Congress. It's basically their ratings about the who's first and who's worst with regard to conservatives in Congress. Matt, thanks for joining us, and congratulations on this incredibly thorough report.
Thanks, guys. 52 years, it's a long time, and the story of Washington, D.C. is not a good one.
It is, and although I got to say, you know, we always talk about that. I always look at who's worst first, right? Who's really screwing it up. Susan Collins gets the lowest rating as on the conservative ACU rating with regard to the United States Senate at 38%, I think, voting record. That said, you know, for all this praise that Joe Manchin gets, oh, he's really a conservative. He should be a Republican. He's from West Virginia. Let me just be clear. Your worst Republican is still better than your best Democrat. Is that a good takeaway?
Yeah. No, I mean, one of the trends that we see over the 52 years is that the longer Republicans are in office as a whole, the more they move to the left. The longer Democrats are in office as a whole, the more they move to the left. It just shows you the influence of the city is not a positive one. So when Donald Trump, and I hope he gets his chance, I pray he gets his chance, said he wanted to take these agencies and get them out of the Beltway, it was one of the greatest ideas. We've seen the same problem with the Supreme Court, which has been bucked recently, which is it seems like people get picked. They're supposed to be conservative. They get on the court, and something happens on the cocktail circuit where it kind of numbs them. Yeah. And the same dynamic here. I will say this. We had Jeff Van Drew there last night. He got an award from a party switcher from New Jersey. The other problem for people like Joe Manchin is as long as they're in the confines of the Marxist woke Democratic Party of today, they have no wiggle room. So Joe Manchin, I think, got like a 16%. You might have it on your screen. You know, come on, give me a break. There's nothing moderate about a 16%.
Yeah.
One thing that I really love about this document that you put out is that you also go through specific votes and give vote descriptions. I think that's so important because I think people they vote based on issues. And so this document gives you a way to go through and say, okay, like let's look at vax mandates. Mm-hmm. You know, who had the best record on that? Senator Ted Cruz, according to your report. So, you know, was this done specifically? I mean, I know this has been around for a long time, but how do you choose which votes to include?
Well, you know, it is subjective. We get to pick. Our team picks. And we have knockdown, drag-out fights over it. I think there's a couple differences in our ratings. Number one, they've been going on a long time, so you can know the history. By the way, you can know the history of comparing Dick Cheney to Liz Cheney. It won't shock you to know that Dick Cheney voted more conservative, much more than his daughter, despite what he said in television commercials. And you can also know on all the issues. Like we don't shy away from any issues. We don't say, oh, well, there are some issues that are just too controversial to touch. We touch all of them, so you can know where people are from a social conservative, economic conservative, you know, foreign policy, all those things. You can figure that out. And the other thing I think we do, which I think is important, is that, you know, I might have a strong opinion. Larry and I, Julie, you and I too, like, you know, I got some of my own opinions, and maybe some of them, you know, most conservatives don't agree with on tactics and other things.
Sure.
But I don't use the scorecard as a way, you know, to unfairly pick one conservative side over another conservative side. You know, when the majority of the good guys are on one side of a vote, that's an issue I think it's fair to score. If it's evenly split, it's a hard thing. I don't think it's CPAC's job to say, oh, this side of the conservative movement was clearly right, this side was wrong.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Matt, and thank you, because that leads me into one, and I'm asking this totally out of curiosity, because I think that right now within the conservative movement and certainly within the Republican Party, there's not a whole lot of clarity about what the real conservative position is on funding Ukraine. And I'm curious how you approached that issue in particular when you did your ratings, or did you sort of recognize, like, you know what, there are good Republicans and conservatives on both sides of this issue with regard to funding Ukraine, and so maybe there's not a clear cut, this is the ACU way to go, or is there? You tell me.
I remember, I think, Larry, you were with us. I can't remember. I think we were in Texas, but when this whole thing broke, the invasion of Ukraine.
It was Orlando. Yeah, I remember. In fact, it was President
Orlando.
Trump's first remarks post-Ukraine, or right after the Ukraine invasion.
Putting a Ukrainian flag on the stage, and then we kind of had this real-life debate over, are we then now endorsing, every step along the way, even though Ukraine is a victim here, clearly. And I thought what Donald Trump said at that CPAC was perfect, and what we even heard when we did CPAC Hungary that Orban is a Putin stooge. And, he took our stage and said, look, Putin is wrong. He's the aggressor and Ukraine's the victim. Now, you can believe all that, and I believe all that, and still want to be careful about kind of skipping into international war, which I think most conservatives believe. I would say 89 or 90% of conservatives disagree with Mitch McConnell, and don't believe that we should spend anything that we can and saber rattle to Vladimir Putin and risk an international world war over Ukraine. I don't think most Americans think that it's worth that. I don't think they think that American troops should ever be used on the ground there. And I also don't think that they take lightly the idea that some kind of NATO-related responsibility would put our people in harm's way. So I think going forward, the other thing on the aid to Ukraine is, why the hell isn't that paid for? Yeah. If you're going to have these billions and billions of dollars at a time when the government has never been in more debt, so much debt that most people are saying we can't get out of it, why is it more important to send this money overseas to the Ukraine when we have all these other responsibilities and problems here that we have to pay for in our budget system?
Right.
And so we somehow don't have to pay for it over there.
And why are these votes always, they're never standalone. Let's just vote on aid to Ukraine. It's always wrapped up in hurricane relief for Florida or some other bill that, you'll get killed for if you don't vote for it. One last question here, Matt. You mentioned Mitch McConnell, and it's sort of sad in the Senate when you look. I think John Thune is the only senator with an over 80 rating who is in leadership for the Republicans in the Senate. Very different story in the House. I was so encouraged to see House leadership with ACU ratings as stellar as they are.
Yeah, Kevin McCarthy, Steve Scalise. We had James Comer there from the Oversight Committee.
Jim Jordan with the perfect record.
Jim Jordan's always getting 100. People like J.D. Vance have a great score. Mitch McConnell has gotten awards plenty of years, and he does deserve great credit for what happened with the Supreme Court. So I've always given him credit for that. But let's face it, when it comes down to a Democrat president wanting to spending a lot of money, senators like Mitch McConnell say fine. And too many of his colleagues say it as well. I mean, we saw that with the ill-named transportation bill. You saw that with the vehicle they passed at the end of the year before Kevin McCarthy had a chance to make a difference on spending. And let me just tell the Republican Party, if you continue to go along with the Democrats on these big spending measures, you will lose the base of your party, and you're losing the fiscal viability of our country. And the middle class get it now that they got to pay the tab, and they're tired of that. It's one of the reasons why our politics is changing so much. And Washington, D.C. Republicans who don't get our award, the number one reason is they think there's no end in sight on the credit card, and they're wrong.
Matt Schlapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union, they do so much more than just CPAC. CPAC's vitally important, but these ratings, 52nd year now, it's critically important. You can see them and really do a deep dive on it. Go to ratings.conservative.org, ratings.conservative.org. Thank you, my friend. Good talking with you.
Thanks, Matt.
Good to talk with you both. Take care.
It's 7:16. By the way, Matt's lovely wife, Mercedes, will be here in O'Connor and Company tomorrow morning. So make sure you tune in. It's time for Jamie Whitten now in the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.
It's here. Download the new WMAL app and listen anywhere you go, anytime you want.
Shh. Don't be too loud, right? You don't want to wake him up. President Biden needs his rest. He's got to get his little nappy time. And who are we kidding? He's not even close to being awake right now.
Oh,
but
no.
He generally wakes up around. Remember when he was talking? He revealed that he uses a CPAP because he had little lines on his face from the mask.
Mm-hmm.
That was at 10:30 in the morning. How long does it take for the little strap lines to disappear?
I think we are a little bit probably not the best judges of when people should get up in the morning.
I guess that's true. Yeah. But our hours, right? We're waking up at 3:34 in the morning. Yeah. We're getting here early. Yeah. We're working our tail. Sometimes Meredith jokes about it all the time. Like whenever I am sitting still for more than like 5 minutes, I'm on the brink of a nap.
Yes.
Which brings us again to the commander-in-chief, the leader of the free world, the man who has the nuclear football, and sitting astride Western civilization, Joe Biden, yesterday meeting with the president of Israel. And he was making a very important statement in front of the cameras there in the Oval Office. Here, take a listen.
We brought Israelis and Palestinians together at a political level, and Aqua and Paul Schramm. Yes. And as
and then the body language here, his chin is on his chest.
Yes.
And he is immobile. Now, apparently he's staring at notes that are sitting on his lap, which, again, it's like it would be nice if he had some facts at his disposal that he could just, not have to read from a card. But this is, I watched this thing, and this, in my mind, is what it was like.
We brought Israelis and Palestinians together at a political level, and Aqua and Paul Schramm.
Oh, it's so cute when they talk in their sleep. Now go to sleep, Mr. President. Shh. Okay, press everybody back out of the Oval Office. Let him have his nap.
When you have a newborn, you don't touch them.
No, you don't want to wake them up.
You just
let them naturally
back out of the room
when they need to feed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On
ice cream
President
cones.
Herzog, Israeli President Herzog, he had that look.
He was like, anyone else see what's going on here?
Exactly that. But I actually would go further. He looked like he was about to yell, "Is there a doctor in the room?"
Yeah,
because
really.
Honestly, it was. I think our friend Rob O'Donnell, he tweeted, Did Biden have a stroke in the middle of this? And he wasn't joking. It really was weird. Chin to chest, mumbling, and seeming like he was going to trail off asleep.
Yeah. Oh, but don't worry. He's fine for another 5 years, everybody. See, here's what happens. They have a day like this, and then I kid you not.
He's going to run. He's going to do his little
They're going to throw him on a bike.
With his Ray-Bans on.
With glasses to cover up his undilated pupils. and at the same time, Kamala Harris is going to show up and say something completely moronic.
I think he's done with the bike. I think he'll
every
do his
single American will be like, okay, anything but Kamala.
That's true. We'll there you go. That's the strategy.
Meanwhile, the White House press corps hates free speech, and they are public enemy number one to a free press in America. Yeah, these are dangerous times to be a reporter in America. Remember all of these histrionic things we would hear about Donald Trump because, he tweeted a meme
Larry,
about CNN.
Free speech is just white supremacy, so just keep it together.
Yeah. Well, our friends over at the Daily Signal is a legitimate journalistic endeavor. Yes, it was started by and owned by Heritage Foundation. They have a political agenda. So does the Huffington Post.
Yeah.
So does Politico, right? So does CNN, for that matter, and MSNBC. But they've got really good writers, really good reporters over there. And one of those great reporters will no longer be welcome at the White House. The White House has determined that Fred Lucas, the White House correspondent for Daily Signal, will lose his White House press credentials in 2 weeks.
The Federalist, the Daily Signal, the Daily Caller, our show. This is where, I mean, frankly, where things get revealed.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the true journalism is these days. It's not that front row at the White House where everyone just sort of nods along, except for Ducey, right, and a few others. But I'm telling you, the work that the Daily Signal does, the work that the Daily Caller does, and again, Federalist and a few others, right-wing media is alive and well.
Hold on. Well, the good news is, yes, it is alive and well, whether we have access to the White House or not. But the good news is, the First Amendment is so important and so vital to the members of the White House press corps that I've got a statement. Got a statement here from AP members of AP, Reuters, USA Today, all three networks. They all got together and put out a statement defending their colleague there and making sure that oh no, I'm sorry, they didn't say anything.
Exactly.
I'm so sorry, we don't have that statement because it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Now
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
7:36 now, Wednesday morning here in the nation's capital, 19th day of July. Wow, this year is just flying by. Coming up, what's in Larry Hogan's political future? Just when you thought he was done, he keeps dragging himself back in. We're going to get into that coming up in just a few moments. But first, Julie Gunlock and I are happy to welcome Hans von Spakovsky. Hans, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, and you and Julie get extra points for actually getting my name right.
We practice all morning long.
We do.
Hans. Hans, of course, is a former member of the Federal Election Commission and now a senior legal fellow over at Heritage Foundation. And I like to say you've forgotten more about election law than most people ever know. So I'd love for you to focus on a couple of things that are going on in the news right now. Let's first tackle what I believe to be election interference here at the hand of Jack Smith, the special counsel, bringing these charges apparently against Donald Trump in the height of the presidential election that we're in the middle of. This is related to January 6th. Hans, if there was a legitimate law that Donald Trump is accused to have broken on January 6th, why did it take them nearly 3 years to finally bring these charges? The timing here is awful.
Well, it is, and I have a hard time believing that there's any legitimacy to it. In essence, they're trying to criminalize contesting an election outcome. That is absurd. Election outcomes are contested all the time across this country, all over the place.
Mostly by Democrats, by the way, up until recently.
Yes. Yeah, no kidding. I wonder why haven't they gone after Al Franken, the former U.S. Senator from Minnesota?
Right.
Remember, he and his lawyer Mark Elias contested the Republican senator who had supposedly won re-election, but then they went to court and they contested it. I mean, this is just the kind of absurd thing that the Justice Department previously didn't do.
Hans, they're going to say that this goes well beyond contesting an election. This is the president having a rally on the Mall the day they were accepting the Electoral College on January 6th, that he stirred these people up, and he knew full well that he had lost the election, but he still inspired people to go and commit violent acts on Capitol. This is their argument. And because they claim, was injudicious with his language and didn't concede the race, that he is now responsible for the events of January 6th. Is there any, you're a lawyer, you've worked in the Justice Department, is there any federal standing for this?
I don't believe so. I recall when we looked at the speeches that he made, he was very clear that he did not want violence to occur. He did not encourage people to engage in criminal trespass, to break into the Capitol. And I think they have such a weak case that, again, I can't believe they are bringing it. And frankly, if we actually had mature, nonpartisan individuals in charge at the U.S. Justice Department, they wouldn't be bringing these charges. But that tells you just who's running things.
One quick follow-up, and there's been speculation, I speculated it myself earlier in the program, that much of this is to trigger the 14th Amendment. That states that if you were involved in an insurrection against the United States, that you're ineligible for federal office. Is that a correct interpretation of the 14th Amendment? And do you think that that's kind of at play here?
I wrote an entire research paper on this because that provision is no longer in effect. The left doesn't want to acknowledge that, but Congress actually passed 2 laws as they're entitled to under the very wording of that amendment in the late 1800s that got rid of that provision. It's the only amendment, the only part of the entire Constitution that gave Congress the ability to vote part of it out of existence, and they did that. That provision is no longer there.
Huh.
I want to pivot over to talk about Trump's comments last night on Hannity. Hannity pressed him on early voting, and Trump kind of hedged. He said, yeah, sure,
Let me play a little bit of it, maybe,
sure.
and we can have Hans.
Sure.
My question is, do you now encourage and embrace early and voting by mail, and legal ballot harvesting?
I do, but I also have to say something else, because the one thing a lot of people,
But this is important,
including
you do.
don't talk about, they also create phony ballots. And that's a real problem. That's my opinion. But they create a lot of phony ballots.
Has your mind shifted? In other words, I think if Republicans start out Election Day down 200, 300, 500,000 votes, that becomes nearly impossible to catch up with.
For some reason, Republicans always wanted to go out on Tuesday and they wanted to vote. And I respect that. I think it's great. And it would be great if we could get back to one day and all the things that you said with one thing else.
I agree with you.
With voter ID. With voter ID.
That sort of sentiment of, oh, look, let's make it a special day. I mean, that's sort of the traditional Republican push here, but or feeling. Youngkin's quite different. Here in Virginia, he now has this Secure Your Vote program, really to encourage voters to sign up to vote absentee and to vote early. I'm curious, though, if Youngkin is going to do anything further on this ballot harvesting, which the Democrats are doing, and it's really resulting in wins for them. Is that on the agenda for the Youngkin staff or administration?
Look, I don't know if it is, but it should be. Look, I've written a lot, and you all know I think early voting shouldn't extend beyond 2 weeks. Absentee balloting should be limited only to people who actually can't make it to a polling place on Election Day. And I think ballot harvesting, I like to call it ballot trafficking, should be banned. But you have to play by the rules in place wherever you are. So if those are the rules that are governing your state, then you need to take advantage of those if you want to win elections. That does not mean that you don't continue to try to change the rules back to get more secure elections. And that's what the legislature needs to keep pushing to do. Youngkin needs to keep pushing to do. But in the meantime, the Democrats, before they left office, as you know, in Virginia, changed all the rules, including driving a huge hole through the state's voter ID law. They need to try to fix that, but in the meantime, they got to play by the rules the Democrats put in place.
Hans, can you stay there? There's a little bit more going on in election law that I think that you can lend your opinion on, especially with regard to ranked choice voting, which just got back into the news here locally. Can you stick with us for one more segment?
Sure, happy to do it.
Oh, thank you, sir. It's 7:48 now, and we continue with Hans von Spakovsky, an election law expert, formerly of the Justice Department, now at Heritage Foundation as a senior legal fellow. Hans, we've discussed ranked choice voting. Real fast before we get to the news here and how it pertains to voters in Arlington, can you just give us a quick summary of what ranked choice voting? Because part of the problem is people still don't know what the hell they're doing when they go to vote.
Well, that is exactly right, because it's confusing and chaotic. What it means is if there are 5 candidates, for example, for a city council seat, when you go in, you don't vote for the one candidate you want to have win. You're supposed to rank all 5 candidates from your first choice to your last and 5th choice. And then they go through this complicated tabulation process where if the person you picked, your top choice, came in last in the race, they throw out your first choice vote, and your second choice becomes your first choice.
Right. And they keep doing that
going
until somebody hits 50% plus one, right?
Right. And in the New York mayor's race, a year, 2 years ago, it took them 8 rounds of vote tabulation before they could figure out who the winner was. And because so many people don't rank. They won't rank all the candidates.
Right.
They don't know them all. They don't want to put a number down to people they'd never vote for. Because of that, like in New York, they threw out the ballots of 140,000 voters.
Right.
But by the time they got to the 8th round, who hadn't ranked all the candidates.
Or like in Alaska, where people voted for Sarah Palin and walked away because they thought, oh, that's what we do in elections.
Yes.
And then when she didn't get 50% plus one, they then went to the second round, and lo and behold, they threw out all those Sarah Palin votes because people didn't rank other people. So that brings us to what Arlington has done. They utilized this for the primary, and then they've just met and they decided, you know what, let's toss it out. It's kind of interesting that they were fine with it for the primary, but now they decided otherwise. It sounds like you think that was the right thing to do, but why should this be left up to such narrow individual jurisdictions? Shouldn't there be sort of state guidelines at the very least on this?
There should, and in fact, the state ought to ban it, which is what many states have done recently, because the push for this, once again, is coming from big left-wing foundations who are pushing this change, even though it's not a good change. I mean, look, the board vice chair, Libby Garvey of Arlington County, was quoted as saying that she didn't completely understand how it worked. Now, how does she expect the average voter to understand it? And I'm sorry, but look, this has been in places in areas like California in municipal races for a long time.
Yeah.
And they've had nothing but problems with it. You may have heard they had a school board race last year in California where they declared the winner. And a couple of months later, only after an audit by an outside group, did they realize that they had declared the wrong winner. God. And the person who they said lost had actually won the election. And the reason was it's so confusing, and the voting and tabulation process is so complicated that even the election officials didn't realize they'd made a mistake.
Every single so-called reform that the left, and it's always coming from the left, what they want to institute to change the way our elections were done, 30, 40 years ago, when win or lose, you'd walk away at least feeling like it was done fairly. Every single reform they put in place has two end results. Number one, it helps Democrats. Yeah. And number two, it makes people suspicious about the system.
And really complicates it.
Throws it into chaos.
Yep.
Got to fix it. But you got to win elections to fix it. That's the rub. You got to win those elections that are so screwed up to actually get in there and fix it. And then the president will call you Jim Crow. Hans, always great to thank you. Very thorough, very, very smart. I don't know how you get on this program, but we appreciate it either way. Thank you, Hans.
Thanks for having me.